Hi, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with swept back, blonde hair, a black headset, and a green shirt. I'm wearing brown and blue spectacles. I'm seated indoors against a purple wall and some bookcases. And like about 25% of the world population, I'm disabled. People who aren't disabled might think that disability is a tragic thing, that we are things to be pitied or condescended to, that there can be no mirth or levity. But I've been disabled a long time, everyone, and it would be awfully boring if we were sad or angry all the time. I think disabled joy also exists, but the disabled community has as many opinions as it has members. So I've asked my friend Julie here today to come talk with me about disabled joy. Julie, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Julie, can you recall a joyful moment in your life? Tell me about it.
So, a joyful moment in my life after getting past the shock of needing to use a cane and being deemed legally blind. For context, I'm only 31. So, past all of that, I think a joyful time for me would have been learning how to use my cane. And instead of seeing all the barriers or weird looks that I might get and all of those things that come with a cane, I saw the possibilities of being able to walk by myself again. I saw being able to go, on short little walks outside of my house and just being able to be independent again.
It sounds like rather than the cane being something that further limits you, it would be a mobility aid that increases your mobility and thus increases your independence. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This brings me to my second question. How has being disabled affected your pursuit of joy or your quality of life?
Big question. I would say that it's had some big impacts
Okay.
because before this, I was able to drive. I was able to kind of just do things without having to plan so much ahead. And now there's more calculation on my end of, okay, if I go to this place, do I need to bring my cane? Do I need to bring anything so I can see better? What kind of shoes am I gonna wear? Like everything has to be considered. And so just being able to go somewhere. And I think at first it had a bigger impact on me. Obviously when you get diagnosed with something, you're like angry, you're depressed, you go through all the stages of grief. And once I got past all of that, because I was just deemed legally blind last year, so it's been a year. In that time, I've been able to research and educate myself on things that I didn't even know about my own disease. And I think those things, like being able to educate myself on being blind and what that means and everything that it is, instead of just assuming what I've been taught by media. Uh, like, for example, that blind people use their hands to touch your face to know what your face feels like. I'm not sure many blind people are doing that, but it's helped me realize that it's a spectrum, just like everything else. And it's crazy. Like, one of the things that I've learned is that only 15% of people that are blind experience total blindness. So that means everybody else, the other 85%, can see. And that makes sense to me, versus what I've been shared and learned throughout, well, since forever, because I've always had this disability. I just now got recognized with it officially on paper.
Thank you for being so vulnerable and walking us kind of through your disabled journey so far. I've heard you make mention to having to learn about blindness and learning to kind of not abide by what you had assumed or expected prior to dealing with this. Julie, what do you want non-disabled people to know about disabled quality of life or about being disabled in general?
The number one thing I want people to know and understand and hear is that it's a spectrum. I think every single disability we could probably say in fairness is a spectrum, and that we all don't experience the same disability the same way. It's going to be very unique to each person, including the language that we use to describe ourselves, and as far as, how we feel going out into the world as an individual. And it's really hard because I think people just, they don't know what they don't know. And then when they think you look fine, it's hard to kind of go against that of like, and I'm blind. By the way, I know I look fine, but I'm actually also blind. Um, and when you don't have a cane or when your disability isn't apparent, I think that's a challenging part too. And instead of just assuming that something's wrong with someone, take the time to actually get to know them and their story and educating yourself on it because it's really easy to find the information in this day and age.
It is. Yeah, I would agree with you that perhaps one of the biggest disconnects we have with the non-disabled world is that non-disabled people might consider disabled people like you and I to be a monolith, or at least several monoliths, and that's really, really not true. So you within your disease community, there's a spectrum of how affected you are and how you navigate those barriers. And there's also that spectrum, in my own disability community as well. So I definitely see you in that, my friend. Julie, this brings me to my last planned question. What is like a recent joy or a recent win that you're celebrating? Or if you have none, which I parenthetically might be like, find it hard to believe, but whatever. If you don't have one, where can people find you online? This is your chance to promote yourself. This is, your chance to be your own cheerleader. So let it rip.
um, well, I am dabbling in trying to make funny TikToks, but there is some coarse language, so I don't know that I want to promote that.
Okay.
But I'll probably promote my LinkedIn profile because that's probably the only other thing of social media that I have. Um, but I would say my win is finding the humor and being disabled. Like I feel like a lot of times people just walk on eggshells around you or
Hmm.
they get really awkwardly uncomfortable. You know what I'm talking about when people are like in my case it'd be like, did you see, like you could just
Hmm.
see it on someone's face that they think that they said the worst thing, and it's like you don't have to stop talking like a regular conversation with me just because I'm blind. And just finding like the humor in all of that, and also seeing other content creators that have disabilities and seeing them just poke fun at themselves and poke fun at the stigmas and the things that people say about them.
Hmm.
um I feel like that's brought me joy, but I guess a personal win outside of finding the humor and all of that would be that I think I'm getting more comfortable being able to just talk about being blind. I'm getting more comfortable with the idea that I'm blind and getting more comfortable going to do things by myself, which is something I've really struggled with for the last year. And one thing that I've been doing pretty consistently is going to the movies. It's something so simple that I think a lot of people maybe take for granted that they can do independently, including taking, like, for example, an Uber. I took an Uber for the first time by myself home from the
Nice.
movies, and I was so anxious the whole car ride. But it was like a 10-minute drive, and I was fine. It's like, look at that. The world didn't, combust. I'm fine. And I also took the bus recently. So it's been interesting being able to do those little things that will promote, like some independence in me that people don't realize is such a big deal for someone that has a disability that is really looking to get their independence. And even though it's, really small, those are the biggest ones for me recently, is being able to regain my independence.
Small in size or time, perhaps, but fairly, seismic in the impact that it's had for your quality of life, it sounds like.
Definitely. And it's so crazy because I just think about the times that I've done these things, because this is something you obviously do a bunch of times when you're not legally disabled, right?
Hmm.
And it's so crazy to me to think, like, even 5 years ago I was driving still. I was still doing things like this where I wasn't really thinking about it too much, or I wasn't thinking of a time where I wouldn't be able to do it. I think that's the thing that gets me every time is like, I used to do this and
Hmm.
now I can't, and now I'm going to do this instead. And that brings me a lot of joy. I guess the last thing that I'm going to mention, because I forgot to mention it in your previous question,
Sure.
was something I would also like non-disabled people to keep in mind is that just like I wasn't thinking 5 or 6 years ago that I wouldn't be blind anytime soon, that's that's legitimately a thing that we should be thinking about, right? What would it be like if that happened to me? How would you deal with this?
Right.
What impact would it have on your day-to-day life? How would you get around? What would you do for work? What would you do with work? Do you have all the necessary tools and resources, in terms of like work accommodation or how you would get around? Do you know anything about your local state disability services?
Hmm.
What would you do if you broke your leg and you needed to get help? What would you do? Right? Instead of waiting for it to happen or like, oh, that would never happen to me. It's our circumstance that really does make us disabled at some point, right? Because there's also acquired disabilities, and I don't think people think of that enough.
That's also true. You think things won't happen to you until they do, generally. So there you are. Julie, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for speaking with me. I loved hearing about your experiences so far, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was
Of course.
great.
Of course. Bye, everyone. Tune in next time.